how racial fetishization of black women began. For a long time, there have been stories and arguments on the fetishization and hypersexualization of black women by men of other races and the media. But what many people are unaware of is that this kind of behavior began and is deeply rooted in slavery and colonialism. During this era, black people, especially black women, were seen as objects of sexual gratification and exploitation. Before we go into the origin of black women's fetish and hypersexualization, let's answer the question of what is fetishization. Fetishization can be thought of as the act of making someone an object of sexual desire based on some aspect of their identity. Black women with bold features, like wide hips, protruding buttocks and big breasts were perceived as undesirable and described as grotesque, but in secret, they were desired even up to the point of being coveted and raped. The first recorded case of maltreatment, fetishization and rape of black women based on race was during the Arab-Muslim slave trade. Not much is said about Arab-Muslim slavery, which many historians have described as the most dehumanizing slave trade of all times. In the Arab-Muslim slave trade, black men were castrated and made eunuchs, while black women were acquired and kept in harems as sexual slaves. After the spread of Islam in the 8th century, there was a high demand for slaves. This led to Arabs and Berbers capturing and buying 11 to 17 million Africans for an uninterrupted period of 13 centuries. Not every black man ended up as eunuchs or on farms. Some were granted access to good education, while some rose to positions of power and became members of the ruling class. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of black women. In fact, at some point, the major reason for the Arab-Muslim slave trade was to capture African women whom they saw as exotic for sexual slavery. So high was the demand for African women that the merchants would double the price of female slaves, with the ratio of captured women to men being 3-to-1. The most remarkable case of hypersexualization and fetishization of black women during the transatlantic slave trade is the case of Sarah Baartman. Sarah wasn't her real name, but a name given to her by her owners. She was a Khoisan woman born in the year 1789. Due to a condition called stereotypes, Baartman had unusually large buttocks and wide hips. Unsurprisingly, an English doctor who visited the Cape took notice of her. Together with the brother of her owner, they decided to make money off of Sarah. Knowing she could not read, they made her sign a contract written by the doctor that required her to travel to England and Ireland as an indentured servant. Sarah was unaware that the false contract she signed would keep her enslaved for life. She was made to appear at exhibitions set up by the doctor with little or no clothes, and out of curiosity, people paid money to see her. It was only a matter of time before what started as mere curiosity progressed to perversion and sexual abuse. In the year 1814, Sarah was later sold off to Esrayo, a French exhibitor, who showcased animals. He made a huge profit off her by allowing men to sexually abuse Sarah. Sarah died a year later. It was not until 8 years, 2002, after Nelson Mandela's request for France to return Sarah's remains, that they agreed to return her to South Africa. She was buried near her birthplace in the Xhosa Kingdom, now in Eastern Cape Province. Before her remains were returned, Saint Hilaire applied on behalf of the Musée d'Histoire Naturelle to retain her remains. A naturalist, Georges Cuvier, who had danced with Baartman at one of Rose's parties, made a plaster cast of her body before dissecting it. He preserved her skeleton and pickled her brain and genitals, and displayed them in jars at Paris's Museum of Man. They remained on public display until 1974. The third significant case of fetishization and hypersexualization of black women was during the colonial era. During the colonial era, many photographers took unclad photos of African women. One of such collection was named Fetish and Gold Coast. It was taken by a photographer, Frederick Grant. These collections are currently held in British National Archives. Little reason is known as to why Grant chose to describe the photos as fetish. There were no shrines in the background of these photos, nor were the women wearing any fetish object or ornament on their body. The photographer didn't deem it necessary to describe these women by the names. titles or the position they held in their families or the communities they belonged to. It didn't matter that even though they agreed to pose for a photo, they did not appear relaxed or at ease. The most logical reason for their uneasiness could be that they were aware of the male gaze on the bare chest. By giving them the name, fetish girl, he reduced them to the status of an object, depersonalized and robbed of identity, reduced solely to their physical appearance. There are so many photos of unclad Africans in museums and national archives. Of what use are these photos to the society? Black people experience racism, but for black women, it's a combination of racism and misogyny. Slavery and colonialism are frowned upon and are almost non-existent, but the damage it has done still lingers and has helped to strengthen dangerous stereotypes about black women. Fetishization has not ended, rather it has been strengthened by stereotypes and under the guise of having a preference and choice. How can we change this narrative? Please drop your opinions and ideas in the comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification for more interesting videos.